What's an NSFW facts about a historical figures that we don't learn in school? Wonder Woman was created by a polyamorous man who was A feminist, B, a kinkster, and C, living with two bisexual women. Wonder Woman was influenced by at least one of his wives, and started as a very overt, kinky, empowering sex symbol for women, and was nearly cancelled because of how explicitly she was being depicted. It's supposed that her rope of truth was partly inspired by rope play and BDSM. F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda, told him that the way he was built, he would never please a woman. He confessed this to Hemingway in a French bar, and Hemingway told him to meet him in the bathroom where he looked at Fitzgerald's dick and told him he was perfectly fine. Emperor Nero kicked his wife Poppaea to death. He later found a slave boy named Sporus who looked like Poppaea, had him castrated, and kept him as his wife. After the death of Nero, Sporus was taken by Nymphidius Sabina, who treated Sporus as his wife. But Sabina was murdered by his guards when he tried to become emperor. Sporus was next taken by the emperor Otho, who had once been married to Poppaea until Nero took her away from him. Otho called Sporus Poppaea and took him as his wife. Otho was murdered shortly afterwards. Otho's rival, Vitellius, planned on using Sporus in a reenactment of the rape of Proserpina in the Colosseum, but Sporus committed suicide. Victor Hugo wrote in the nude as a form of motivation. He was a horrible procrastinator, so he would lock himself in a room and have his clothes taken as encouragement to get his work done, because he was cold. When he was finished, he'd get his clothes back. The Boris Yeltsin pizza incident, in which the former Russian leader was found in just his underwear outside the White House hailing a cab so he could go get pizza. https://www.politico.com/blog/on-congress/2009/09/Yeltsin drunk in his underwear hailing a cab 021553. That one French president who ended up dying of a blowjob. Herodotus, an ancient Greek historian, once stated that female mummies who passed away in ancient Egypt were found more decomposed than male mummies. The reason being was that the females were kept at home for longer periods of time before sent for embalming to prevent necrophilia. Lord Byron was an anorexic, drug and sex addict who shagged his sister. A lot. Edit. Wow, this really took off. Smile. I was going to write about Casanova, but I couldn't be bothered with all the typing. It would be a hell of a lot to type. But if you want another wild ride, look up that pos. Not quite a historical figure, but John Pemberton, the inventor of Coca-Cola, did so because he was chronically addicted to morphine and was trying to get off of it. Original ingredients were cocaine, famously, sugar, alcohol, and caffeine. He was trying to supplant his other addiction. It did not work. The author of Frankenstein lost her virginity on her mother's grave. John Quincy Adams boasted that outdoor boning was an American invention. Between that, his pet alligator, and a life spent in public service, literally from his teenage years until his death, probably far more interesting than most people who've held high office in the USA. Ben Franklin liked to stand nude in front of open windows. Victor Hugo was a very diligent visitor at the Parisian brothels. So much so that the day he was buried, all the Parisian brothel closed for the day so prostitutes could go to the funeral. Kary Mullis was doing a lot of LSD when he developed polymerase chain reaction, PCR. That Adolf Hitler might have had an illegitimate child. A French man by the name of Jean-Marie Loret claimed that his mother told him he was the son of Hitler on her deathbed and supposedly had letters sent by Hitler to his mother. Jean passed away in the 80s, but his son is still alive, and he is curious if his father's claims were true or not. He took a DNA test back in 2018 to see if he is in fact the grandson of Hitler, However, we don't know the results of the test yet. Peter the Great scoured the Russian Empire in search of dwarfs and giants in an effort to breed a race of each. While he couldn't find enough giants, he found many dwarfs. He would bake a huge pie and have a dwarf get naked and wait inside it to jump out and scare guests. In addition to using them as regular stewards and servants and such. That was the tip of Peter's crazy. Queen Victoria really loved having sex with her husband Prince Albert. Really loved sex with him. To the point that she was quite audible through doors and walls. Several times per day. James Joyce wrote absolutely filthy letters to his wife Nora. He was one randy chap altogether. Edgar Allan Poe, M27, married his slightly younger cousin, F13. Sigmund Freud loved cocaine. He wrote a book on how it helped cure mental illness. In it he talks about a patient who he recommended do a buttload of cocaine. She died and he was like, man shrugging. He was also Jewish and escaped Austria to France during World War II. During the 3rd century CE, it was reported that a Roman merchant was selling counterfeit jewels. One of the victims was, in fact, the wife of Emperor Gallienus. As punishment, the merchant was sent to fight a lion at the Colosseum. However, instead of a lion, the merchant was confronted by a chicken. It turns out that Emperor Gallienus opted to retaliate with a prank of his own, allowing the merchant to leave with his life. Lyndon B. Johnson had a giant penis he was proud of. He nicknamed it Jumbo. Ben Franklin was a rebel indeed. He liked to get naked while he smoked all the weed. While Churchill was visiting the White House shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, FDR accidentally rolled in on Churchill as he was getting out of a bath. Churchill, buck is naked, just casually tells FDR, "As you can see, Mr. President, I have nothing to hide." The Founding Fathers could outdrink any fraternity. After they signed the Declaration of Independence, they went to the bar and racked up a massive tab. If I remember correctly, I think it was about a bottle of whiskey, 2 bottles of wine, and 7 to 10 ales per person. Victor Fleming, director of The Wizard of Oz, sexually and physically abused and harassed Judy Garland, the actor for Dorothy. Benjamin Franklin wrote a letter on the benefits of getting it on with older women. 1. Because as they have more knowledge of the world and their minds are better stored with observations, their conversation is more improving and more lastingly agreeable. 2. Because when women cease to be handsome, they study to be good. To maintain their influence over men, they supply the diminution of beauty by an augmentation of utility. They learn to do a 1,000 services small and great, and are the most tender and useful of all friends when you are sick. Thus they continue amiable. And hence there is hardly such a thing to be found as an old woman who is not a good woman. 3. Because there is no hazard of children, which irregularly produced may be attended with much inconvenience. 4. Because through more experience, they are more prudent and discreet in conducting an intrigue to prevent suspicion. The commerce with them is therefore safer with regard to your reputation. And with regard to theirs, if the affair should happen to be known, considerate people might be rather inclined to excuse an old woman who would kindly take care of a young man, form his manners by her good counsels, and prevent his ruining his health and fortune among mercenary prostitutes. 5. Because in every animal that walks upright, the deficiency of the fluids that fill the muscles appears first in the highest part, the face first grows lank and wrinkled, then the neck, then the breast and arms, the lower parts continuing to the last as plump as ever, so that covering all above with a basket, and regarding only what is below the girdle, it is impossible of 2 women to know an old from a young one. And as in the dark all cats are grey, the pleasure of corporal enjoyment with an old woman is at least equal, and frequently superior, every knack being by practice capable of improvement. 6. Because the sin is less. The debauching a virgin may be her ruin, and make her for life unhappy. 7. Because the compunction is less. The having made a young girl miserable may give you frequent bitter reflections, none of which can attend the making an old woman happy. 8. 8 / and lastly / they are so grateful. Anne Frank's journal, or at least the editions most commonly seen around the English-speaking world, is heavily censored by its publisher. In the versions that aren't censored, we can see that she was a teenager who unashamedly described her sexual and romantic attractions to both boys and girls, admitting to have asked to touch one of her friend's breast before she went into hiding. Lewis Carroll had an unhealthy collection of naked kids. https://news.artnet.com/artworld/ Was Lewis Carroll a pedophile? His photograph suggests so. 237222. Alexander the Great was the most bisexual man to ever exist. He kept his right-hand man around as a lover, and would frolic nude with him on occasion. Alexander's father once thought his son was too eager to spend time fucking men and sent an accompaniment of female prostitutes, eunuchs and a few men to help him develop more of a taste of women. And he fucked all of them, not just the men, but the women and eunuchs too. Catherine the Great had a collection of perverted pieces of furniture. Tables with penises, chairs with vaginas, all that. Napoleon liked it dirty. There were two famous rival courtesans in 18th century Paris. They decided to have a contest on who could bed the most men in 24 hours. One had 24 lovers. The other? 25. Einstein and Charles Darwin both married their cousin. The funniest part about this is that in Denmark we learned a lot of NSFW historical facts in school. Like the fact that King Christian VII of Denmark would actively, frequently, and without even hiding it, literally did bar crawls in Copenhagen with a particularly enterprising prostitute, who also became his official royal mistress. I learned this at 10. We're not very prudish here. Gandhi slept, literally, alongside naked girls to test his celibacy. Hitler was a meth addict. This one is graphic. The Outlaw Josie Wales was originally a book published by Forrest Carter. Afterwards, it was discovered that this Forrest Carter was in fact Asa Carter, the guy who wrote speeches for George Wallace. Y'all remember the segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever speech? Yeah, that was Asa. Asa also formed a group called the Original Ku Klux Klan of the Confederacy, because he felt that the mainstream KKK wasn't anti-Semitic enough. Members of this group then tried to kill one Nat King Cole, because they thought rock and roll music encouraged race mixing. And then the graphic part, members of this group kidnapped Judge Edward Aaron, a black man with developmental disabilities. They beat Aaron with a crowbar, carved the letters KKK into his chest, and castrated him with a razor. They then poured turpentine in his wounds, threw him in their trunk, and dumped him in a creek on the side of the road. Allegedly, they kept his scrotum as a trophy. George Wallace would later pardon 4 of the 6 men who attacked and murdered Aaron. Edit: Judge Edward Aaron was his name, not a judge. NSFW thing that I learned from my high school econ teacher. Kellogg was weird. Cornflakes were invented as some sort of anti-masturbation thing, and apparently he did enemas with yogurt. My teacher was an alumni of a certain college that was once owned by the Kellogg family, where I ended up going as well. All of the comments. I must read all of the comments. Lawrence of Arabia was into S&M. When Gandhi's wife was stricken with pneumonia, British doctors told her husband that a shot of penicillin would heal her. Nevertheless, Gandhi refused to have alien medicine injected into her body, and she died. Soon after, Gandhi caught malaria and, relenting from the standard applied to his wife, allowed doctors to save his life with quinine. This is 100% going to end up on one of those TikTok videos with Minecraft parkour in the background. Cleopatra's nickname from Caesar was Golden Mouth. You can guess why. I meet very few Americans who know about octoroon/quadroon balls. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/plot%c3%a7h #quadroon_balls in New Orleans. There was a separate class of free blacks called gens de couleur. This population included Creoles, people of mixed African/French descent, and Haitians who had immigrated after the revolt in 1791. Anyways, there were these formal balls called octoroon balls where single/eligible free black women would attend to meet white men who were looking for a mistress. It was basically sexual slavery. Young, mixed women could enter into a formal contract with a landowning white man and get property, a monthly allowance, and future educational arrangements for their mixed children, with the understanding that the children were not legitimate and would not stand to inherit anything from the white man, who usually had his own white family and legitimate white heirs. They couldn't marry, but they could try to arrange a better future for their kids and hopefully live a financially secure life. This practice is not unique to New Orleans. It hails from the French colonial culture of plazage. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/plot%c3%a7h. Unit 731, and other Japanese atrocities. The only things related to Japan in World War II that I learned about it in school was Pearl Harbor and the atomic bombings, which gave me the impression that poor Japan got stomped on brutally for sinking some boats. I learned all the other shit when I dived into learning history as a hobby outside the school syllabus, and saved up money to buy history books. I gotta say, I was pretty dumbfounded. If you ever bought Sea Monkeys, you've helped the KKK buy machine guns. Royal family members had people witness them having sex so they could confirm the legitimacy of the heir. Not sure if they still do it nowadays because there are DNA tests. And #X200B. Edit, damn, I never knew this comment will get so much upvotes and comments. Thanks guys. Nancy Reagan was the throat goat. Well known in Hollywood for her oral sex abilities before getting with Reagan. Lyndon Johnson would whip his dick out when his words and bluster failed to give him the upper hand. There are many tales of him just flopping his gigantic dick out and saying, "What do you think of Jumbo?" Ben Franklin wrote extensively about how great it was to fuck MILFs and what are now known as cougars. JFK's idea of sex was a frantic pounding while mostly clothed that tended not to last more than a minute. It's thought this technique developed since that was all the free time he was able to muster during campaigning. A quote I remember about it was he seemed to prize urgency and completion as fast as possible. Marilyn Monroe had constant gas. All of her husbands corroborated it privately. Nixon's campaign team for his comeback invented the modern dog whistle racism and replacing noted racist words with analogs like thug. His chief of staff and campaign officials were recorded talking about it. Alexander Hamilton was suicidal by the time of his death, and many scholars believe he went out of his way to make Burr think he wanted to kill him, going so far as to spread rumors about how he'd be aiming to kill, all to ensure Burr wouldn't aim wide or throw away his shot. Here's a modern one. Rudy Giuliani. Everyone's favorite during 9/11 and everyone's big joke now. Started out by starting an investigation into congressional aides to see how many gay people were fucking in the Capitol so he could out them publicly. Alexander Dumas based The Count of Monte Cristo on his badass dad. Anne Frank noted her thoughts about sexuality and some adult jokes in her diary. Most people read the SFW version. Her writing is not really NSFW though. It makes sense that something like that is in there. It was the personal diary of a teenage girl after all. Your sexual development doesn't completely stop only because you are hiding and live in a time of horror. I like that fact actually. It makes her even more relatable in my opinion. And it always makes me sad that so